I apologise for my absence over the last week. I've been waiting for my new camera to arrive, and it finally has. And before I see any of you armpits in the comments section saying, "It looks the same," no it doesn't. We're in 4K, 10-bit, 422. It does not look the same. Don't tease me. I will come and find you. I enjoy enjoyment. It is, for the most part, enjoyable. Except for when it isn't. Which is almost always. Normies, the topic of today's video. But before we dive into why it is that they ruin everything, I think it's important that I first define what it is that I mean when I say normies. And let me be a little bit more specific, because we're going to be talking about normies within the world of modern entertainment. Movies, televisions, books, music, and of course what I consider to be the god medium that is video games. The perfect blend of the audible, the visual, and the tactile. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, of course, that's the opinion of a single man who lives in his bedroom, but not so fast, because this bedroom belongs to my parents, because I still live with them. So the joke is very much on you. So what is a normie? Well, I think, there's a few interpretations out there, but I think the majority of people would define a normie as someone who has basic taste. Someone who doesn't seek to refine their taste in any way, they just seek to satisfy it. They enjoy whatever happens to be in front of them at any given time, which usually happens to be whatever is popular at that time, because things within pop culture tend to have the biggest marketing budgets. The kinds of people with yes opinions. When you ask someone about something they like, you ask them, like, why is it that you like this thing? And they say, oh, it's just really great. That's outstanding. Some may describe normies as being, people who are new to or inexperienced with X thing. And, I guess I kind of agree, but the problem is that doesn't help to differentiate a normie from, let's say, a beginner. Because there's a big difference. There's a big difference. Beginners, although inexperienced, often search out skills, hobbies, and interests for their own enjoyment. They start something with the intention of becoming more knowledgeable or proficient at that thing. No one ever started saxophone lessons hoping they'd be really shit at it one day. Where a beginner lacks knowledge and or ability, so too does a normie. But a normie also lacks interest, which might seem rather insignificant, but it's not. It's very important, because although their intentions may not be malicious when dealing with X thing, they're not pure either, because, you're more likely to cause damage to something you don't care about. Normies ruin everything is a battle cry that you will hear echoing throughout the various hallways of the online world, and is a din that I will sometimes lend my own voice to. Now, this is because I enjoy nothing more than loading my misery into a weapon made out of refined dissatisfaction and firing it in the general direction of someone who appears to be smiling. It serves them right. Go and be happy with people who can still be bothered to put on shoes. But I certainly don't need someone who can't even spell GCSE telling me that Thor Love and Thunder was such a lot of fun, though. Go and fall down a well, will you? Now, I don't have a problem with people enjoying themselves. That's a lie. I can't stand it. My issue with normies is not the fact that they have fun. If someone were to shoot me directly in the foot, it wouldn't bother me much if they were smiling while they did it. It's not their emotions that would matter to me in that moment. It's more what they're doing. So my point will be that normies are harmful. And I would say that, 90% of normies don't realize they are doing damage, and they don't intend to do that damage, but damage they do nonetheless. Allow me to explain. We're in the midst of a culture war at the moment, but let me simplify this for the sake of a concise video. And I'm going to start with this incredibly complicated and intricate diagram that I've made, and I'm going to call this diagram. And allow me to explain what is going on with this behemoth of intellectual fornication. Okay, so you have the modern movie and television industry represented by this circle here. Next door to it is the general public. And within this bubble that we're going to call the general public, there are two vocal minorities. And these are the fans and normies. Now, these two sections, without doubt, have a little bit of crossover, but for the most part, are separate sectors. So the current culture cycle plays out as such. Industry releases new product, usually deriving from an already established and loved product, whether it be a remake, a reboot, an adaptation, or a sequel, except it's watered down and homogenized to appeal to the broadest audience possible. And in a concerning amount of cases, is then produced by teams that actively dislike whatever product the new project is based on. For example, the Halo showrunner said that they didn't bother playing the games and had no interest in doing so. It's reported that more than one of the writers on the Witcher series actively disliked the books and games and went as far as to openly mock them. And just the other day, the showrunner for the upcoming Last of Us series aired his beliefs that video games aren't as emotionally impactful as movies, saying death in the game means less because it's just watching pixels die. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that the show was going to be bad, but seeing such blatant disrespect and a lack of understanding for the medium of video games is not a great start, considering the fact that you're, I don't know, working on something that's based on a video game, and the only reason you have a job is because of that video game. The rampant arrogance and incompetence within the industry right now is startling. But anyway, they release their new product. Everyone watches said product. The reviews come back. The general public will say, yeah, it was alright. Normies, because of their lack of exposure and understanding to the original product, will often say things like, oh my god, it's the best thing ever. But then the fan base will often come out and say, oh, well, hold on. What's going on? The people who made this show clearly had no interest or respect for where this came from. And if you subtract, this flashy CG, you're left with a pretty empty product. There's then usually pushback against said product. And this is when the industry pulls out its trump card, which unfortunately is often diversity. Now, diversity is a great thing. I want to live in a world where, regardless of who you are, where you come from, what you look like, it's your ability that defines you. Whether that be acting prowess or your ability to fill a role, therefore, the door is open to anyone, as long as they're willing to put the time and work in. And regardless of your beliefs, diversity has been, on many occasions now, weaponized to shelter shoddy production. Take Obi-Wan, for example. The fans didn't like the fact that Obi-Wan was sidelined in his own show. He was made out to be incompetent and cowardly, which is the complete antithesis to what Obi-Wan had been for the last 40 plus years. The villains weren't particularly compelling. It bent an already well-established universe to fit its very disappointing story. And it didn't reward and in fact punished the fans of the prequels, who were probably the people who were most excited to watch this show. Now, Disney saw this backlash unfolding on social media and decided that that would be an opportune moment to address racism within the Star Wars community. Now, don't get me wrong, there will be terrible, terrible people who like Star Wars. But these people represent such a minutiae of the criticism that was leveled at this show, and an even smaller percentage of the fan base as a whole. It really did beg the question, is this Disney Star Wars fighting for what's right in the world, or is it just a tactical maneuver to shade them from negative press? Now let me play devil's advocate for just a moment, and let's say this was a genuine attempt from Disney to do what was right. Okay, so they put the message out there that there is rampant racism within the Star Wars community, and this was while the Obi-Wan show was airing. Then the show ends, and it's been however many months since it finished airing, and they have not followed up on this at all. There's been nothing at all. They've never mentioned it again. Seems quite strange to abandon such a poignant message, but it is what it is, I guess. Now, let's say that it was tactical. We know, looking back throughout history, that one of the most effective ways of silencing a person or a group of people was to kill them. Pretty simple, right? But, that can take a bit of work. It can get a bit messy. It's not necessarily legal. So some of the sharper historical figures realized that there was another way of silencing people that didn't involve killing them. You didn't really have to raise a finger. You simply called someone crazy. Simple as that. Scientists were unfortunately often the recipients of these allegations. I suppose some of them were also murdered. But my point still stands, because who listens to a crazy person? Okay, thanks for the history lesson, Jonny, but what on earth has this got to do with the entertainment industry? Well, the entertainment industry adopted this technique very early on and has used it up until this day. But something, within recent years changed, and the technique changed slightly. And this was, rather than calling someone crazy, you now call them an istorophobe. This is the new thing. But the thing is, these people are out there. Don't get me wrong. These people are very real and they are out there. But these terms are being used so widely and indiscriminately that they're starting to lose all meaning. But as soon as someone is labeled as one of these things, they can expect to be ostracized. They can lose their platform, and in some cases, even lose their income. And that's a very, very good way of getting someone to shut up. If you can't get them to physically shut up, you take away their ability to speak. Now, this is all very well and good, but what does this have to do with normies? But you see, because normies are the reason that you see these techniques used so widely today. And that's because they've slowly adopted parts of nerd culture over the last few decades as it's become more popular and has begun to leak into pop culture, none more so than video games. And although their involvement and understanding is surface level, they would consider themselves to be part of the culture, which is Great and all. But when someone like Disney pipes up and says, our show isn't bad, these people are just racist. Normies, because they don't have a deep understanding of the product, they can't identify the incompetencies within that product, and therefore assume that, oh yeah, there must be. And then they begin to attack the real fans of that product. Not only this, but when people don't have the knowledge that comes along with reading the books, playing the games, understanding the lore, being a genuine part of a community, and they're easily won over by flashy graphics, which are more accessible than ever, they don't think too deeply about the product and leave the cinema feeling like they've just watched the latest creative marvel. These opinions are then backed up by the spineless media, so then when they hear a fan airing criticism about the show, they can't possibly fathom why. They see it as an attack on their character. Lots of people who defend these terrible productions often aren't defending the productions, they're defending themselves, as no one wants to be known for having a shit opinion, so they take it personally. This happened to Star Trek, Wheel of Time, Doctor Who, DC, Marvel, the list goes on. Now, were these franchises originally kept afloat by a big band of bigots who didn't let anyone else in? No. They were supported by passionate fan bases who often found those products as a result of being outcasts. Nerds have been bullied for decades now, but they found things like Magic the Gathering, D&D, Warhammer, places where they were welcome, places, where they could escape. And since all of this nerd culture is becoming popular all of a sudden, normies want a piece of the action. So it's time to kick out all of these nerds again. And the modern entertainment industry is more than willing to give them a hand in doing so, because they can't be bothered to try and satisfy fans anymore. Because they've realized shoddy Hollywood writing just isn't going to cut it for adapting these incredibly rich and complicated worlds. Why bother? There's no incentive anymore. Why bother putting in the level of effort that, say, the Peter Jackson trilogy did? Why bother doing that when you can just slap a few women in key roles, and then idiots on Twitter will applaud you, regardless of what your writing's like? The same people who used to bully me for watching Star Wars are now the very same people that call me a bigot on Twitter because I think it's trash. Ain't that some shit? Normies also often, almost always suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect. And this is where their lack of knowledge for a given product plays into their ego. They can more confidently make bold claims about something they know very little about because they don't know enough yet to understand that they don't know very much about it at all. Like, how many times have you heard someone say, oh, Baby Yoda's the best Star Wars character ever? They've probably never even watched the original trilogy. They've definitely not watched something like Clone Wars. They've never played, like, Rogue Squadron or Knights of the Old Republic. Half of them don't even know that Baby Yoda's name isn't even Baby Yoda, because they haven't even watched The Mandalorian, which is probably one of the most basic Star Wars shows ever. Okay, that's a very tame example, but they are what we'd call dangerously stupid. Another normie slogan that you'll hear thrown about whenever, fans have something to say is, but you'll never please the fans. If you've ever tweeted that, do everyone a favor, go dig a hole and just lie in it. Fertilize the soil. At least you'll be of some use then. That is the most stupid thing I've ever heard. It is not a case of showmakers not being able to please the fans. It's that they can't do their goddamn job well enough. They don't have the creative ability. These worlds require passion and attention to detail, care. They require finesse. And things that these modern showmakers, more often than not, are just incapable of providing. Simple as that. Another term you might hear thrown about is NPC. I love this one. If you don't know, NPC stands for non-player character, and it refers to the characters that you'd bump into whilst playing a video game. They often have one or two sentences to say. They often wander about aimlessly. Their only role is to fill up a bit of space, make the world feel a bit more realistic and rich for the player. That's about it. So when you hear someone in the real world being called an NPC, whoever's firing that insult is trying to say that that person, has no opinions or thoughts of their own and, don't provide any real service to the world. It's brilliant. It really is. Now, a lot of people will tell you, you can't say things like that because it's dehumanizing. It's like, yeah. What do you think I'm trying to do? It's like, it's like saying, you can't call people stupid because that's questioning their intelligence. It's like, no shit. What do you think I'm trying to do? So, to summarize, normies don't produce this shit entertainment, but they do help to keep the industry afloat that does. These are people that don't care about a given franchise, making excuses for Hollywood walking all over the actual fans of that show, that they will then attack themselves in the form of Twitter rants. The days of stop gatekeeping are over. We opened the gate, we let everyone in, we wanted everyone to have a good time, and now they want to oust us from the very thing that we started. Not today, no. Hey, here's a joke for you. What does a normie say to the god of death? Nothing, because they don't get the reference. Even though they probably watched the show. Look, if I could give you one piece of advice, it would be just be very wary of anybody who seeks to silence anyone. Someone who wants to kill conversation is no friend of yours. Just keep that in mind. Now, let me make one thing very clear. I do not give a donkey's dick about people's political views and opinions. I care about laser go pew pew, spaceship goes zoom. So let's get back to that, shall we? Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, you bitch. And of course, a big shout out to my top tier members, Puzzlemon, Flunky, Jax, and Brennus. I hope you're all having a wonderful new year. It's great to still have you with me.
And Saint Nemo, you gorgeous little bastard. Thank you very much for becoming a tier 2 member. I'm sorry I didn't see this sooner. YouTube is useless. It doesn't give you notifications for these things. I've just gone and checked, and I'm so sorry I missed you off, dude. All the best.
And of course, the tier 2 members as well. Steve the Goat, Dr. Melsky, Saeed, MG, Virgil, Kuno, Sacco, Mark, Maiden, Sensei, Fang, Hadziu, Michael, Terpia, and the wonderful Yarn Witch. Thank you ever so much, guys. Once again, I really appreciate you sticking with me. And of course, a big thank you to the tier 1 members and the channel members as well. I hope you all had a great Christmas and a good new year. And looking forward to an exciting 2023. And there we go, another day, another video. Will you join me for my next one? You better do, you little bitch. But until then, make sure you take care of yourselves, guys. And I'll see you all very soon.